Welcome back to Ryan and Brian's Bible Bistro. I'm Ryan, and that's Brian. Say hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
And this is the Bible Bistro, a podcast about the Bible, theology, and all things
related to the Christian faith.
That's right. I've trained you so well. It's related to Christian faith. It doesn't have to just pertain. It can be way out there related.
I don't know, related.
Well, Brian, it is such a welcome.
It doesn't have to be pertinent, is what you're saying.
It can be a tangent. We can just talk about anything.
Well,
at this
that
point.
is true. We do have some of those. So.
Yes. Anyway, well, we're back and we're in person.
First time.
We're so
in a long
back.
time. First time, long time.
First time. Maybe not long enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're back and it's exciting. We spent a little bit of time yesterday, last evening.
We're celebrating somebody's special birthday.
Who?
Who's the special boy?
That would be me. Almost as we're recording today, it will be past by the time you hear this, but 45 years ago, the angels rejoiced as Ryan Sarver came into the world.
Right. And the world has never been the same.
Yes. Well, yes. Well, anyway, we're glad we're back together. We're in Bistro East.
Yeah.
We're about to, and we're
in the palatial estate of
the palatial estate. Yes.
Family, yeah.
We're going out to dinner tonight, and we're going to be so.
We're looking forward to that. A little Thai food tonight, I hear.
It is. We're going to a place in Indianapolis called Bodhi. Bodhi. If you're in Indianapolis, I highly recommend it.
And this is not. I can trust me. This is not sponsored bit here.
This is not a sponsored bit. It is fantastic food. It is delicious. They got an outside garden. Not going to be for us today.
No, we got storms on the way.
Storms on the way, but incredible Thai food. So if you're in the Indianapolis area, now I will warn you though. If you do come, you got to get reservations, and so you got reservations
a week ahead of time. Believe it or not, they open them up at 7 days ahead. Very strict policies. It's a little soup Nazi.
It is, but I'm telling you, you don't question the food. Just eat it, Brian. When we get there, but it is delicious. So we're looking forward to that and hang out a little bit more. But we're back today to the bistro to get back to the longest running series.
Yeah,
on the Sermon on the Mount. But we are at 202 episodes.
To our knowledge, 202 episodes. That's pretty good.
202 episodes, and
not every podcast lasts that long.
Yeah, and what did you said? You're like, I can't believe we've done this 200 times. Right. And then you said,
it seems a lot longer.
Yeah,
we have fun. It's good. It's a good thing.
It's good. But
and it's good to hear from people who use this in a variety of different ways. And the series help people sometimes. They can go back to them and go to our website. We have several series. One on Zechariah, someone recently was talking about using. Daniel, we've done. There's different series on there that people have found helpful in teaching or preaching, that kind of thing. So
yeah. All right. Well, we're back in the Sermon on the Mount, which is in Matthew.
Yes, it is. And Matthew 5 through 7. Chapters 5 through 7.
That is. I memorized that back in Bible college.
Well, let's hear you recite it.
Blessed.
We're on Matthew. Well done. We're on Matthew chapter 5, verse 33 today. So just to give you a recap, remember we talked about Jesus and the law a couple of episodes ago, and that was kind of introducing this section. And then there's this whole series of things, a lot of them from the Ten Commandments. We're going to see last time the teaching on divorce wasn't from the Ten Commandments, and now we're getting kind of more into the general law. But Jesus says, I'll remind you again, you've heard that it was said, but I say to you. That's kind of the series that we're in. Today we're going to talk about two of these, hopefully, if we get through them. One of them is Jesus teaching on oaths and what he says about that, and then Jesus teaching on turning the other cheek or whatever. Both of these have had really direct impacts on the way that Christians have practiced, and we'll talk about some of that. And historically, the way that we've looked at this, for example, there's been some people who've taken this idea of no vows and no oaths very seriously to the point that they won't give an oath in court, for example, or these kind of things. So we'll try to unpack what Jesus is doing here, like we've been doing. We'll see how he's contrasting not necessarily the Old Testament law, because a lot of these things the Old Testament law really says, but I think he's kind of redirecting people toward a truer understanding of what God's intention was in the law. where it had been maybe by the Pharisees and others. Jesus is very critical, in Matthew particularly, very critical of the Pharisees. And we'll see some of that too. So go ahead and read Matthew 5:33. This is the beginning of the section we're going to look at today, if you'd read that for me.
Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king.
Okay, that was a little bit more there. You read several verses there, but that's okay.
Context is everything.
Well, that's true. So this is the Old Testament precedent, though. So just read verse 33 for me again, and then I'll kind of
again,
we'll show you what's going on.
You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made.
Okay, so this is about oaths and vows. Do not break your oaths is the law. And there's three different Old Testament passages kind of give us the precedent. Kind of here's what the Old Testament context would be. I think I have you reading Numbers 19 there, and then I'm going to read Numbers 30. Why don't you read 19? I'm going to read all three of these, and let's you and I kind of just discuss
you want to do Leviticus 19 or Numbers 19?
Leviticus 19. I'm going to do Numbers 30.
There you go. Leviticus 19, what is it?
12.
19:12. Okay, here we go. Do not swear falsely by my name, and so profane the name of your God. Okay. I am the Lord.
Okay, and then Numbers 30 says, verses 1 and 2 says, Moses said to the heads of the tribes of Israel, this is what the Lord commands. When a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath to obligate himself by a pledge, he must not break his word, but must do everything he said. And then we've got Deuteronomy 23, I think.
If you make a vow to the Lord your God, do not be slow to pay it. For the Lord your God will certainly demand it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from making a vow, you will not be guilty. Whatever your lips utter, you must be sure to do, because you made your vow freely to the Lord your God with your own mouth.
So how would you summarize kind of what the Old Testament, in these three passages, what are some of the things what did you notice there, Ryan, as you're kind of
if you're going to make a vow, you got to keep it.
Right.
I mean, like it's, if you don't, and if you do make an oath and you don't keep it, you're going to be guilty of sin.
It is literally a sin. It's there's going to be consequences if you fail to do this. The first one there, if you swear by the name of the Lord and then you break that oath, you profane the name of the Lord. You're misusing that misusing His name in a way. So that's kind of the teaching on oaths, and this is kind of what Jesus is referring to. I would summarize the New Testament law to say, if you make an oath, you have to make sure to fulfill it. Now, there's, interestingly, in the narrative parts of the Old Testament, and even in some later Jewish literature, which we're not going to look at that today, but in some of the narrative parts of the Old Testament, there are warnings in the story about making what I'd call hasty vows. This is kind of a repeated theme. There's two in the book of Judges we're going to look at. This reminds me of when we had Dr. The name's completely slipped my mind.
Michelle
Knight talking about Judges. The last part of the book of Judges is really a bad example. Things are not going as they should be. And twice we have stories in the end of the book of Judges that warn against this. In some ways, they're kind of like a tragedy that warn us against the making of vows. So I have part of Judges chapter 11, 29 through 31 for you to read there. This is the first of these two stories about this.
Yeah. Then the Spirit of the Lord came on Jephthah. He crossed Gilead and Manasseh, passed through Mizpah of Gilead, and from there he advanced against the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord, if you give me the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering.
So this is an example of a hasty vow. So Jephthah is one of these judges, and you'll remember in the book of Judges, we have this whole series of kind of leaders that God raises up when the people are oppressed because of their failure to follow God. So, and as I said, the later you get in the book of Judges, just the worse it gets. Jephthah, even to the point that the best rulers that God can raise up are not very good people, and so Jephthah here is being given victory, and so he makes this hasty vow. Whatever it is that comes out of my house to meet me when I go home, that's I'm going to sacrifice as a burnt offering. And do you remember the story? What
his daughter comes out.
Yes. And he's, according to the law, he's bound by this. This is because what does the law teach? Don't break. If you make an oath, you better keep it because there's going to be serious consequences. Well, this is an example where then he offers his daughter as a sacrifice. There's a whole thing that goes along with this, and there's a practice later in according to the book of Judges, there's a practice where young women continue to I should celebrate's not the right word, but to remember Jephthah's daughter and this kind of thing. And so this is an example of hasty vow. Here's another one. This is in Judges chapter 21, verse 1. I'm just going to read the vow. And let me give the context here first. This is a pretty complex story. These two, and this is the very last chapter of Judges, so it's not going to be good. But this is a story about really civil war. Benjamin is fighting against the rest of the tribes of Israel, and they defeat several of the tribes, but then finally the Benjaminites are defeated, almost entirely wiped out. And then in the beginning of chapter 21, there's kind of this idea. Let me read verse 1. The men of Israel had taken an oath at Mizpah, not one of us will give his daughter in marriage to a Benjaminite. So the problem is they went and they put all the Benjaminite women to the sword, and so now you have just a few Benjaminite men and no Benjaminite women, and they made this vow: we're not going to give any of our daughters to the Benjaminites. So the problem is then they begin to realize, this is going to mean one of the tribes is going to be gone, which is going to become a serious issue. If they have no wives, so they end up. It's kind of one of these, two wrongs don't make a right.
Yes.
They end up going to this other area when everybody doesn't gather, all the people don't gather in Israel. They said, who didn't come? And so they go to that village, and they end up taking they kill all the men, they kill the wives, and then they take all of the young women as wives for the Benjaminites. So again, not the right solution. So both of these stories, and like I said, there are others in later Jewish literature, are wrestling with this question. If you make a hasty vow, then it can end up in a tragic situation. Kind of almost reminds you, if you've read some of the Greek tragedies like Oedipus Rex or some of these kind of things where there's, things just don't end up going well, and so that's kind of the background for what Jesus teaches in this. Now, this is where I want you to go ahead and read. Go ahead and read verse 34. Here's kind of Jesus' solution. We won't read the rest of this. We'll come back to that, but just read verse 34.
But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne.
Okay, so we can go there.
Or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King.
Right.
You're laughing at me.
I know.
But you scolded me for reading too much.
Now I'm saying you're not reading enough. The idea here is Jesus says don't even. The solution to this is don't swear an oath at all. Right. So the hasty vow part of it is to make sure that you're not going to do this. There's another interesting practice and this is from later rabbinic literature. It's called the Kol Nidre, and it comes from the very beginning, on the Day of Atonement, at the very beginning of that service, I'm going to call it, at the very beginning of that remembrance, there's this song that's sung, and this is from a much later period of time, but it gets to this problem we have in the law. And basically, Kol Nidre comes from the Aramaic words that mean all vows. And it's something that's chanted. In fact, I'd encourage you, go and listen to this. You can find them on YouTube or whatever. It's a very dramatic beginning to the service on the Day of Atonement. And basically it says, all vows, let me see, I think I have a quote here. Our vows are no longer vows. Our prohibitions are no longer prohibitions. Our oaths are no longer oaths. And basically it says, any inadvertent oath that we make in the next year doesn't count. And the whole point of it is to say, because if we break it, we recognize that there are serious consequences. Again, thinking about the whole history of the Old Testament and the rabbinic literature, this is the issue. Do you have numbers? Oh, I had numbers, didn't I? But
I've got numbers.
Yeah, Numbers 15:26. Go ahead and read that for me there.
The whole Israelite community and the foreigners residing among them will be forgiven, because all the people were involved in the unintentional wrong.
So that whole section there is about the idea of unintentional sins, and this is something 3 times the congregation kind of responds with this verse to say, this is an unintentional vow, so it's not going to count for anything. And there's a lot of controversy about that. But my only point, and again, I'm not saying this is a background for the New Testament, but it gives us a sense of the issue of the consequences of making a vow that you don't keep. So that's what the Old Testament, I'd say, is very concerned with, this idea. If you make a vow, you'd better take it seriously. So Jesus' response to that is you shouldn't make vow at all. Again, as we've seen before, the Sermon on the Mount, really the purpose of it, Jesus is saying kingdom people who are part of the kingdom of God, need to be different. There's a different standard, and there's a different standard's not even the right way to say it. There's a different emphasis here for the people of the kingdom. So now, go ahead and read all of 34 through 37, if you would. I know some of it's repetition. So.
Yeah. So you want to read, and there's not...
yeah, go ahead.
So, sorry, I'm in the wrong...
I say to you.
Yeah. And do not swear by your head, yes or no. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one.
Actually, you can go back to starting at 34, read down through 37.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one.
And then James 5 is a parallel to this. Basically, James says, let your yes be yes, your no be no. Obviously based on this. Jesus' brother brings in that teaching. So I want us to think about this a little bit, Ryan. What is the purpose of swearing an oath or making a vow at all? What are you really doing when you swear?
You're committing yourself, like in all circumstances.
Right.
I mean, it's... You're committing yourself beyond just a yes or no. You're committing like something of yourself.
When do you? I mean, you've heard people say, "I swear." You know, what are some modern sayings that I swear on a stack of Bibles, or I swear on my mother's grave, or you hear, I swear by my on my eyes. There's all these kind of weird sayings that we have. And when do we find people saying those typically, would you say?
It's when it's like they're trying to plead their case that, what I'm saying to you is I'm going to fulfill.
Absolutely honest, right? I really mean what I say. And that's what I think Jesus is getting at here when he says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. If we are honest and truthful in our, and this has to do with our dealings with others, right? When you make a vow, typically it's some of these vows, like we saw in Judges, is just to God. But a lot of times when we swear an oath, like, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, right? You're in a context where they're asking you to make sure that what you say is what it really is.
Because it kind of implies a negative here. That there is, more often than not, you're not giving a correct answer.
That's exactly.
You're not giving the truth.
That's exactly the point. And that's what I was getting at. The reason you swear is really to say,
I know, based upon my past, you shouldn't believe me, but this time I swear.
Have you ever? And I try not to say this, but you know how we are with our words sometimes. But have you ever been in a conversation with someone and they say, "Now I'm being honest. Let me be honest with you," and you're kind of like, "Okay,
I wish you'd be honest all the time."
Yeah. So up to now, what have because I can just we have those.
But
kind of sayings.
it's a figure of speech, but it also is saying something when you call it. You're kind of like, so have you not been honest?
Right.
Well, no, I have, but it's like, well, I need to give real emphasis that this really is the truth.
And so I think what Jesus is saying here is, if as a person of God's kingdom, we are honest in our dealings, like in the obligations that we make, in the contracts. If our word is good, right? If what we say we follow through with,
there is no need for an
there
oath
is no need for an oath or swearing. And so that's what I think. I think that's what Jesus is getting at here is what this idea of taking these oaths seriously is really to say we need to live lives. I'm going to use the word integrity. Live lives of integrity that people can trust that what we say is what we do, or what we mean, what we really mean, what we say is what we really mean, that kind of thing. So I think that's kind of getting back to the heart of what the law was about. was making sure that we follow through on our word. That's the kind of people that God desires us to be. And so the law was shaped in a way to lead us into that kind of thing. And so Jesus is saying, if you are a person whose yes is yes and no is no, you don't need swearing at all. Let me see. There's one other thing I was gonna bring up here, and I can't remember what it was. That's all I can think of right now. No, I know. Matthew 23. So one of the things we've been emphasizing through all of this, you can tell how much we've practiced this. After 202 episodes, I think we have this down pretty well, don't you?
We have our spontaneous conversations down well.
So in Matthew chapter 23, this is the woe to the Pharisees that we find in Matthew. And I'll remind the listeners or viewers what we've been doing in the Sermon on the Mount, and it's because I think that's what Jesus is doing, is saying this is our behavior as people of the kingdom contrasted to others. And there's several, he mentions hypocrites later on, we're going to see, but Pharisees is one of the ones that he says, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees, then this is, you have no part in the kingdom, right? So here's what he says to the Pharisees in verse, chapter 23, verse 16. Excuse me. Woe to you, blind guides, you say, and so here is the rabbinic teaching. If anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by that oath. You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone who swears by the gift of the altar is bound by that oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, anyone who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And anyone who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. In other words, this is one of the ways that they had given to avoid swearing by the name of the Lord, because you heard what it said. You don't want to profane the name of the Lord. And so if I swear by the temple, then that's going to be a different kind of thing. And so he says, anyone who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and the one who sits on it. So a similar kind of teaching, again, that gives us a sense of the heart of what Jesus is getting at here, is that you've made it into the Pharisees have made it into these very fine points of differentiation here. You can swear by the temple, but not the gold of the temple, these kind of things. And Jesus is saying that's missed the point of what the law teaches us about making vows, and what the Old Testament scriptures say about making hasty vows. Anything you want to add, or anything you want to think about deeper there?
Yeah, well, no, I'm very shallow. We've scraped the surface.
That's not what
I know. I'm busting your chops.
Okay,
this is the bistro. The bistro is.
You're so sensitive.
It's friends. Oh my gosh. No, I don't think. I think it's really putting in that context of that. What does it mean by the oath and the swearing? Yeah. And it's that implication that the yes or the no is just like be consistent with your word. It's that integrity piece that the reason we have to jump to those things is it's because we're not.
Right.
And then just like as the Pharisees, how can I make an oath without promising without swearing on God.
Right.
And so it's just, it's amazing as I even think about us and even me as a child, as we all do this probably as kids,
right.
It's these fine ways that we try to split this hair.
Right.
And that if we're going back to like, well, I swear this time, it's like, maybe there's a sign here that
this time I really mean it.
I really promise I'm really, really not going to do that, or I am going to follow through on that. So no, I think it's, I just had not thought of it in that way before, and just that the contrast of why do we need to make the oath, and it's just like as we look back at Jephthah, it's like, does he need to make that oath because is it because and it's like it's almost, I think in Jephthah's mind is like, I'm making this oath because then it means you're going to do what you're going to do,
follow through,
but it's like I think God was already doing that, and so be careful where we how we're positioning ourselves in these situations.
You made me think about this on the playground. It's I had my fingers crossed.
Yeah.
All these ways we had, like you said, to get around it, get away with it. So one of the questions, and I mentioned this at the beginning, we probably should deal with this. There have been Christians, and there still are today Christians, who will not take certain oaths or certain vows. There's usually ways around it. Even in those, like in court, there are different ways that they can make sure you're telling the truth and those kind of things. There are certain in military context, which we'll talk about in a minute too. And again, I would say I don't know that that's the primary point. I don't know that that's the main point that's being made. I think the primary thing that Jesus is saying is make sure that you're being honest and truthful in all your. And I don't think he's prohibiting making vows or an oath, like our marriage vows and that kind of thing. But I think he's saying we need to live lives of integrity. I think is the primary focus.
And again, as we, this is kind of going back to 2 episodes. I can't remember, but just even about he's dealing with something pretty directly, as we already talked about with the Pharisees,
right?
And on the temple, but not on God. But just like we talked about with marriage, where it's like unless there's been adultery committed,
right?
Like, well, there's something very specific that the Pharisees are trying to twist around here. That there's a real specific context for this.
That's well said, and I do think that that's really what Jesus is kind of responding to is that issue of, I had my fingers crossed, right? Or I didn't swear by the gold of the temple, I only swore by the temple.
Yeah, it seemed to be like there was maybe a little bit. Back then, and I'm going to say again, still today, where we're splitting hairs on some of this stuff. Like I think it's where. Not splitting hairs on what the text means, but like how we try to position ourselves in these things like, well, I didn't really do that, or I really didn't do that. It's interesting. I'm going to say this, and there's no comment on that. I've seen this video online where it's there's some, the Hasidic Jews, and it's on Sabbath they can't do certain things, but it's like this guy's like, here's how we can get around doing this, like tie a string around this, and that makes it part of the boundary lines of our house and so forth. And that is no comment on them, but I'm just saying, like, even us as Christians we can start to play those lines, like, well, I haven't crossed that line, or I didn't swear on God's name, but I made this oath or whatever. So.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I do think it is. I don't think it's any particular group. It's human nature.
It's human nature. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
The word, when you were talking about that, the word I was thinking was we justify ourselves. Right. We find ways to try to make ourselves seem better, and it's just an idea of, well, let's just be honest people, that we can trust one another, and if we say something, we follow through with it. I do think the hasty vows are something to be learned there about.
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking about Sting's line. I never made promises lightly, but there have been some that I've broken. That kind of thing, and so anyway,
I don't know. I can probably think of. I can't think of anyone in particular, but there's been times when I'm like, yeah, I'll do that, and then like you give me about 2 hours, and you're like, oh, why did I say?
I was probably worse with my kids actually. When I'd say, oh yeah, we could, but then here's our hedging. We could probably do that, and it's like, oh, you said we're gonna do this. No, I said we were probably gonna do it. Right?
Notice I didn't make an oath that we were gonna do that.
I didn't swear by the temple. Anyway, so that's where. Well, so let's look at this eye for an eye thing. Interestingly, both of these, whenever we look at these side by side, again, there have been Christians for whom this is a very central teaching. I think I've mentioned before that I'm currently serving in a Mennonite church, and in the Mennonite context, this particular passage is an important one. The Sermon on the Mount in general, I think I mentioned before, is important to Mennonite to Anabaptists in general. And then I think this idea of don't resist an evil person is one that gets brought out a lot. So let's see what Jesus says here. Look first, and just verse 38, please.
Thank you for the guardrails.
Being very specific.
You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. End of verse 38.
Okay. In Latin, this is the law, and we're going to see some places it's in the Old Testament law. This is called the lex talionis, which means the law of retaliation. And it's actually a very, very old law. And it's interesting because this is one that's in the Old Testament, but we also find it in lots of other ancient contexts. Most of us in school at some point in history learned about Hammurabi.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Oh,
In school, the Law Code of Hammurabi, which is this ancient Babylonian text that
it's written on a stone scroll. Is that correct?
I think that's correct. Yeah, I remember. It's been a while since I've been in school, but yeah, I do remember talking about this. But the interesting thing is this same kind of law is in the Code of Hammurabi. We have a couple of Old Testament examples too. I think you're going to read Leviticus 24, 17 through 22, and then I'm going to read from Deuteronomy. Go ahead and do the Leviticus.
Anyone who takes the life of a human being is to be put to death. Anyone who takes the life of someone's animal must make restitution, life for life. Anyone who injures their neighbor is to be injured in the same manner. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The one who has inflicted the injury must suffer the same injury. Whoever kills an animal must make restitution, but whoever kills a human being is to be put to death. You are to have the same law for the foreigner and the native born. I am the Lord your God.
So there's the idea. That's where we get the eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Break for break, fracture for fracture. Mm-hmm. So here's Deuteronomy chapter 19, 16 through 19. So this is Moses speaking to the Israelites before they go into the land. He's kind of reminding them of certain things in the law. He says, if a malicious witness takes the stand to accuse someone of a crime, it's interesting. I didn't mention this before, and I should have probably in the oaths. Some of the things that we have here are kind of have a court context.
A legal context.
Yeah, we'll see this in just a minute with this one as well. If a malicious witness takes a stand to accuse someone of a crime, the two people involved in the dispute must stand in the presence of the Lord before the priests and judges who are in office at the time. The judges must make a thorough investigation, and if the witness proves to be a liar, so here's the idea of giving false testimony against a fellow Israelite, then do to the false witness as that witness intended to do to the other party. So what they're, you understand the point? So like the example I always use this in is in when I'm talking about the beginning of John 8, this famous story of we call the pericope adulteri. We've got another episode on this, I believe. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. They're bringing a false accusation to some level. Again, there's disagreement over that. Go back and if you want to hear about this, go back and listen to that episode. Its episode number, we have no idea, but.
We'll insert it with AI right there.
Wow, that's good to know. So I forgot what I was saying. The people who brought the false accusation against the adulteress, technically, then, if it was a false accusation, which it was to some level, then what should happen to them. Mm-hmm. Is not what Jesus does, which is let them go, but they should be stoned
themselves. Well, and we have that in the story of Susanna in the Apocrypha.
Exactly. So they receive the penalty, the death penalty, because they're trying to inflict that on Susanna.
Daniel steps in and it's like, stone him up.
Exactly. So then due to the false witness, as that witness intended to do to the other party, you must purge the evil from among you. The rest of the people will hear this and be afraid. Never again do such an evil thing to be done. So this idea of false witness is an important part. And so the idea of the lex talionis is in that context as well. Now we often use this to say, "Oh, I'm going to get you back. Whatever you did to me, I'm going to do that back to you." Mm-hmm. But actually, it's a limiting factor, and we don't think about that a lot. But here's the thing: the primary idea is that it should be. The way I like to put it is, it should be proportional. Mm. So if you hurt an animal. You borrow my donkey and you wreck it you're going too fast with my donkey and you wreck it on a corner, then you pay me restitution, but it should be proportional.
Or I wreck your donkey.
To the same, I'm going to wreck your donkey. Yeah. So, but that's the way again, I think we think about it. And again, the lex talionis is the idea of retaliation. This is what R.T. France and there's been. Several different commentaries we could use, but I thought he expressed it well. Its intention was not to sanction revenge, but to prevent the excesses of a blood feud by stating that the legal punishment must not exceed the crime. So you get what I'm saying? It's like, oh, you did this to me. And in fact, you see this in the book of Genesis. You might remember Lamech, who was the Enoch's son. I can't remember. But Lamech says, oh, you hurt me. I'm going to do back to you 77 times. Mm-hmm. And so the Lex Talionis was really kind of what I'm trying to say, a limiting factor. Mm-hmm. You will not exceed that, because you can see how it can kind of, yes. Well, we've had that happen, right? Playground. Oh, you did this to me. Well, I'm going to do even more to you, and then they're going to
punch me. I'm going to punch you.
Right. Then you're going to come back, or gang warfare, whatever you want to think of. Sometimes when we're in these, I'll jokingly say, well, this is how wars start, right? We start with the punch, and I give you 2 punches, and then next thing you know, here we are. So that's the background, I think, and the primary idea of this. So then go ahead and let me see, where do I have you reading? Go ahead and read. Yeah, go ahead and read then verse 39. What's Jesus' response? I forgot to put that in here. I apologize.
No, that's all right.
Here's Jesus' response. So again, we've seen this pattern. Here's what was said to people long ago, but I say to you.
Yeah.
So here's what he says.
But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well.
And go ahead with the last.
Yeah,
might as well do all three of these examples.
If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles.
So he gives all 3 of these examples, which are real-life examples from his time. And this is going to require a little bit of background. So the first thing he says is don't resist an evil person. And literally the word there is to stand against. It's antiistemi, and it means to stand against. There's a couple places we see this. One was Isaiah. I don't think I had. Did you have that there?
I can pull it up
real quick. Isaiah 50, 6-8, and it's actually in verse 8 where you find this idea of stand against. What I want you to see is this is a courtroom scene as well. So again, this is a law, right? So laws are courtroom kind of things. Yeah. So listen to where Isaiah, in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, we find this word antiistemi used in the same, not antihistamine, but it's similar.
Yeah,
but
I was just going to say.
But we have this here. Go ahead.
Yeah. I offered my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who pulled out my beard. I did not hide my face from mocking and spitting. But the sovereign Lord helps me. I will not be disgraced. Therefore have I set my face like flint, and I know I will not be put to shame. He who vindicates me is near. Who then will bring charges against me?
So right there, the one who will bring charges against me is the word antistemi right here. Okay, go ahead and read the rest of it now.
Yeah, he who vindicates me is near. Who then will bring charges against me? Let us face each other. Who is my accuser? Let him confront me.
Now, obviously, this is the suffering servant here in this passage. We know this part of Isaiah is that suffering servant song. And so here we have, and it reminds us, of course, of Jesus. I've set my face like flint. I'm not going to resist when these people do evil to me. I'm going to, and it's a very similar kind of idea. I'm going to offer my cheek to them, right? I'm going to offer my back to them. If they want to scourge me, if they want to pull my beard, I'm going to allow this to happen. This idea that so it says, why do you think it says the one who vindicates me is near? What do you think the implication is? Why is he able to do this, would you say? The one who, so vindication, right?
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
So, well, I'm thinking about this is that a lot of times, how do you feel when I slap you on the one cheek, or, more often you're like, man, you're really hurting my feelings with your words is kind of what I hear you say. What was you said just a while ago before we were getting started? I said something. You're like, man, you really.
Yeah, I invite you into my home and then you treat me with scorn
for my birthday.
Yes.
So we want vengeance is really, I would say, the kind of context here, right? We think this is not
right.
I'm thinking about
Injustice.
C.S. Lewis's in Mere Christianity. The law of the playground. That's not fair, right? I gave you mine. I gave you a bit of my orange. You need to give me a bit of your orange back. This kind of idea. And so the one who vindicates me, he's saying, I don't have to stand for myself because I'm trusting in God to be able to do this. I don't have to get vengeance myself. So again, in the context, in a Christological sense, when we think about Jesus against this background, he's able to face his accusers with out, defending himself because he trusts that the Lord is going to ultimately vindicate him through his resurrection. That's where I think, that kind of an idea. So now let's think about us in this context then. There are all kinds of ways that, you give me an example. I know I'm putting you on the spot again. I love to do that. That's my favorite thing to do in this podcast is, can you think of situations where something was done to you and you really felt the desire to respond with,
Yes, I can think of several, right?
Okay. Can you, in general terms, without,
implicating
something that statutes of limitations has passed for perhaps.
I think it's when something untruthful has been communicated about me.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
That has it's been like a character framing of me in a certain situation, and it's like for me, I mean, just honestly, I want to go scorched earth.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like,
I have a friend who just this last week had this happen, and actually, part of it was they lost their job, and there were not only was it a loss of their job, but then in addition, there were things said about them, like you said, to defame their character. Mm-hmm. And I think our natural response is to say, I'm gonna get mine back. It's lex talionis, right? It's fair, eye for an eye, right? Mm-hmm. I'm the one who has to make sure, though. In that case, I'm the one who has to make sure my character stands. I'm the one who's got to defend myself, right? We sometimes even, I think we teach this sometimes to our kids. Well, don't let anybody walk all over you. You may have heard that as a kid, or you may have given that advice to your kids. Don't be a whipping boy. Don't let them do that to you. But here's, I think, the difference. Jesus gives 3 examples here. Let's kind of take them in order. The first one, and let me see, I have Leviticus 19:18 here, and I'm trying to remember why I have that in here.
You want me to look for you?
No, I've got it here. Oh yeah, here it is. It's do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. That Leviticus 19, of course, is a very famous one. We're going to get to that in our next episode. But this idea of don't bear a grudge or try to get revenge. What does Paul say in Romans? He says, vengeance, he quotes the Old Testament, vengeance is mine. Don't seek.
That says the Lord.
Yeah, don't seek revenge. So here he gives 3 examples. So read, I'm trying to remember, it's at verse 41 here in Matthew 5. Man, I've done a really bad job with all of the scriptures today.
The cheek is 39 and the shirt is 40. And
yeah, give me 39 then. Just read 39.
Yeah. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also.
Now, this is really interesting because you have to kind of imagine, if you're not here, if you're not watching us on YouTube, you kind of have to imagine this. Think about your right cheek. Put your hand on your right cheek here, Ryan. Very good. Now, if I'm going to slap you, how am I going to slap you on the right cheek?
You're going to use your left hand.
Or you're
going to backhand me.
I'm going to have to backhand you.
If you're ambidextrous.
But the idea, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a backhand.
It's a backhand, and we still use that phrase today, like a backhanded, like an insult or
backhanded compliment.
And that's really what it is. It's an insult. It's an insult. It's a very insulting way to like kind of come up to somebody and just give them the. It's a little bit like I imagine in all those medieval movies, right, where you have the gloves and you slap them on the face. It's an insulting kind of thing. And so there's even, and in the later rabbinic literature, there's even some court cases about this, where if someone insults you in that way, then you could get compensation for that, right? You could get back at that person for that reason. We just saw Hamilton a couple of weeks ago, and great musical, I love it. But that whole idea of the dueling there, we see a couple of different times in that musical. It's that kind of thing. You've insulted me, so I'm gonna I have to defend my honor by facing you in a duel, right? That didn't end well. I don't want to give away the ending of the thing, but Aaron Burr ends up killing Alexander Hamilton. I hate to.
Oh boy!
Hate to tell
For
you.
those of you who don't know the story,
it is in the very first song. So yeah, but so that idea of an insult, and so what Jesus says, you turn the other cheek to him. instead of saying, "Oh, I'm going to get mine back. I'm going to seek revenge or vindication," Jesus says in that and this is a real world context, right? Mm-hmm. He says instead you should just turn the other cheek, right? You should give them the other cheek to slap as well. Here's the next example. What do you have?
And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well.
So the idea of lawsuits. Now this, in Exodus chapter 20, and I didn't take time to give you this passage, but I'll just tell you the context there, is the law actually prohibits this. They say you can't take somebody's both their undergarment and their outer cloak as well. And the idea is if someone is suing you for the lesser thing, the undergarment, the cloak would have more value, then go ahead and give them your other. So again, if you think about lawsuits, the whole circulation around lawsuits, the reason that we sue someone is in order to defend our rights, to make sure that our rights are paid attention to, right? We're seeking, even the way we say it, we're seeking restitution or recompense from the court. Well, I'm going to have to take you to court. I can't settle this with you in any other kind of way. And so that kind of idea, Jesus here says, well, if somebody sues you for this thing of lesser value, go ahead and give them the thing of the greater value. Don't worry about trying to defend your rights is the primary context or the primary idea of this. And again, this was a very real kind of situation. And it still is today for that matter. What's the final one here then?
Yeah,
this one's very interesting.
Yeah, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles.
So the verb here, forces you to go 1 mile, is actually a really interesting word. It's only used 3 times in the entire New Testament, and it's a technical term. A Roman soldier could at any time force someone to carry their pack for them, but according to the law, they could only do that for 1 mile, 1,000 steps. Do you know the other context where this word's used? The other 2 places, once in Matthew and once in Mark. Mm-mm. The interesting thing is that the same word is used when it says that they forced Joseph to carry Jesus' cross. Mm. That same word, and that's how it says it. Force. It's Joseph, right?
No, I don't think it's Joseph.
It's 20. It's Matthew, Luke 21:15. After I said Joseph, that didn't sound right.
No, that's not. Yeah. Well, Luke 21:15 is for I'll give you the words and wisdom, and none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict.
Oh, that's a different thing. I apologize. I can't. I didn't.
We'll figure it out.
Right down here, but it's where they're forced to carry and that's the same context in Mark. So a Roman soldier had that authority. Right, and what we can find, and we have historical example of this, that especially in Israel, the Jewish people really resented
Simon
that.
From Cyrene.
Simon, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, my apologies. I made myself look foolish that time. You're always saying I bring these things up out of the blue, but those are the 3 times that word is used, and it was a legal technical term. I used to think that there's just been so much research done on this. I've been convinced. Almost every more recent commentary takes this line, and it seems like it's a pretty established thing. There's an article in one of the journals, I can't remember off the top of my head, that has pretty well established this fact. It's actually a Persian loan word, but anyway, you guys don't care about that. But this seems to be the technical term that's used in order to legally, you would have to be required to carry what the Roman soldier told you to carry, but only 1 mile. Mm-hmm. And again, this was resented. But here's Jesus teaching. He said, you know what a person of the kingdom is like is if someone forces you to do that mile, you go the extra mile. You go a second mile with them. And you just think about the difference in attitude that conveys. It's like instead of thinking, oh, I'm not going to go a step further than what I am required by the law, instead of being resentful of this request, I'm going to actually go ahead and do this. So all of these 3 examples, I think, are what they're doing is they're changing our attitude. Instead of thinking about what's fair for me, what are my rights, it's saying we need to have an attitude of generosity and grace toward others. And instead of being concerned about, well, go back to the Isaiah passage, the one who vindicates us is near. I don't have to worry about defending myself because the Lord is the one who's going to defend, quote unquote, my rights, what is, quote unquote, due me. Thankfully I don't get what's due me, right? That's the message of the kingdom. That's the gospel, is that there's grace, that we don't get what is due us, what we have done to God, the way that we have failed him. And so when we're in a situation that we're worried about our rights, Jesus is saying you need to have, instead of being like everybody else, you need to have the kind of attitude that shows a willingness to not only do what's asked or not retaliate. Don't resist an evil person, but instead you're reflecting in this a sense of the generosity and the grace that's been extended to you, is the way I would understand this passage. That's what I think these have in common, and that's kind of what I think Jesus is saying here. So I guess the question is, how do we implement this today? And again, there are those who take this, and for them it's really a base. What Jesus is teaching here is really the basis of pacifism, right? Mm-hmm. And they're thinking strictly in a context of violent encounter. So they would say violent resistance, do not stand against. But I'll remind you, this is the technical word that's used in court cases. That was the other thing I had there in Luke 21:15, by the way, was this idea of standing against. It's used in those contexts, not only of violent resistance, but even in a court, for example.
Okay.
And so I don't think it's necessarily, I want to be careful here, and I respect those who've interpreted it and read it in this way, but I don't think the idea of literally not striking another person is the primary concern. Now, we shouldn't be strikers. We know that, from different passages. But I think the primary context here is that we need to have a kind of attitude of generosity and grace rather than being one that's seeking to defend our own rights. So thoughts on that? Or,
I mean, it's a lot to think about there with that.
Yeah. So in some ways, again, I talked about this, that some people see Jesus tightening the law or making it more difficult or all this kind of thing. And I don't know that that's even the right thing, the right way to think about it. But instead it's kind of redirecting who we are. It's kind of showing how the law was intended to shape us in very particular kind of ways.
Yeah, instead of intensification, it's kind of getting to the heart.
Yeah,
of the heart of the law.
And so in some ways, this is not. I think we've sometimes. I want to be careful again how I'm saying this. I think we sometimes have treated the Sermon on the Mount almost in that way. I'm not going to make a vow. Right, I'm not going to strike another person, literally, and I don't know that that's the thing. I think in some ways it's a much broader. Like when I say, one of the questions I have here at the end for us is, how do we implement this today? I think there are much more implications than simply getting into a physical fight with getting into a fist fight with somebody, or even broader than lawsuits. It's having the kind of attitude that I don't feel defensive. I don't feel like I have to be the one who defends myself. Like in those situations, like we were talking about, when your character's been defamed, it's not your responsibility to make sure that you get yours back, but instead you trust yourself to God that everything will be revealed for what it is. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's good. I've heard many times, it's this intensification of the law, and Jesus is intensifying it in such a way to show us that we need grace, and we couldn't, you know what I mean? Like it's a very hardening, and we couldn't do it. But I think, kind of positioning, again, we've talked about this many times, that cultural context, and, kind of looking at it through some of that cultural lens, right. I think really kind of helps it open it up to see what is Jesus trying to do here, besides just that intensification, but it's trying to help them see kind of the other side of the law, what the law was intended to do, right. But in this framework, it become such a rigid system.
The lex talionis, this just occurred to me that the fact that it occurs in so many different, with similar wording in so many different contexts, even Babylonian and Mesopotamian, all this. It occurs to me that this is part of human nature, that when something is done to us, I mean, it's our initial response to think, I'm gonna get mine back.
Yep.
And instead, the idea of being citizens of the kingdom mean that we don't consider first, well, how can I make sure that my rights are followed? But instead, we think first about this idea of being generous and doing what's asked of us and not resisting, not standing in opposition to another person. So.
Yeah. Well, Brian, this is great.
Good.
I appreciate it.
Hope you've enjoyed it.
Yep. So we're going to continue on this in the next episode. Again, we're going to go through all the way through the Sermon on the Mount, aren't we?
Yeah, maybe. It might be 6 or 7 years from now when we get done. So
episode 404.
We have some other things we want to talk about too. There's some other things we've been looking at in past episodes. We've said, we should do that sometime, and maybe we're working on some good interviews too. So I'm hoping to get some of those in the near future. So
yeah. Well, Brian, thanks so much. I appreciate it. If you're enjoying this episode, you can find us at thebiblebistro.com.
Exactly.
On the website there, you can look at all our past episodes are on there. We're adding all the videos on there as well. So if you want to watch us on YouTube, you can. You can see us there. You can also find us on Facebook at The Bible Bistro or Instagram The Bible Bistro. Patreon. You can find a link to that at the top of our new website.
And what I heard is Ryan doesn't want anything for his birthday other than more Patreon subscriptions.
Yes, but we're all. That's all I want for Christmas. We've talked about, we're going to do some writing here soon and some other things as well to kind of, and writing's a little bit different in that we don't always have to be together to do these episodes, but we can write some things and do some different things as well. So be on the lookout for that. That's going to be coming soon. New ways just to kind of engage and other things to think about. And so excited for that as well. But yes, like, subscribe, share, all the things. We appreciate it. And Brian, appreciate you so much for the time you put into this. And we'll see you next week.
All right. See you.
See you. Bye.